Back in the 80s, I lived in a flat in southeast London. The flat was located in a small tower block 10 stories high with 4 flats per floor, one per corner as it were. The flat overlooked a local park and afforded very nice views of the area. The neighbors were generally very amenable, but everybody tended to keep to themselves, so no one had any problems with anyone. That all changed when a new family moved into a flat down on the 2nd floor on the same corner of the building where we lived. We lived on the 8th. They were not the most gracious of individuals, frequently leaving rubbish bags strewn around their floor's lobby for days, rather than depositing them in the communal bins, and parking their cars in other residents' allocated parking spots. In other words, the epitome of the appellation chav. Complaints to the local council invariably fell on deaf ears. They soon developed a reputation for hosting loud drunken parties at the weekends which tended to go past midnight. This was pretty fecking annoying for us and the other residents, but we were somewhat less affected due to the distance between our respective flats. One particular Friday evening, however, proved to be the straw that broke the camel's back. At around 10 PM we heard the music start up, but it now appeared that the hosts had recently purchased a new sound system because the bass was now intolerably loud. I can only surmise that a peculiarity of the building's design, coupled with what sounded like much larger bass speakers, appeared to magnify the effect in our bedroom to the point where it made it quite impossible to sleep. At about 11:30 PM, I trotted downstairs and knocked on their door. It was flung open by what I could only assume to have been the male resident, looking somewhat the worse for wear. I politely asked him if he'd mind turning the music down as it was very loud, rattling the furniture in my flat and making it difficult to sleep. F off. Charming, So I go back upstairs and call the non-emergency police number and explained the situation. They assured me that someone would be around in due course. Being a Friday night, I reckoned it might take an hour or two. So, with much wailing and gnashing of teeth, we sat there waiting for the cops to rock up. Sure enough, about an hour later, I saw a patrol car pull up and a couple of London's finest enter our building. A few moments later, the music gets turned down and the police leave. No sooner had the car disappeared up the street than the music went back up to its previous level. We endure it for another half hour, no change, so once again I call the cops. This time it takes closer to 2 hours for them to turn up. Yep, definitely a busy Friday night. They finally arrive around 3 AM and once again the music is reduced to a sensible level. Unfortunately, shortly after they depart, back up goes the volume to its previous furniture shaking intensity. As you might imagine, by now I was royally pissed off. Indoors too, someone not normally prone to displays of anger was positively foaming at the mouth and looked like she was single-handedly going to reenact the Battle of Austerlitz in glorious technicolor, together with full orchestral accompaniment. It was then that I had a dazzling idea, one so fiendishly cunning and yet devilishly simply a guaranteed cast iron, 100% pure 24 karat stonker of an idea so brilliant that I felt certain that within a few minutes I could stop this once and for all and execute my plan in such a way as to make it impossible to trace back to me. Once, grabbing my toolkit, I crept down the stairwell to the 2nd floor just to double check the actual flat number. Having confirmed the number, I went back up to the 4th floor. In the stairwell just next to the exit door to the 4th floor lobby was a wooden access door that concealed one of the 2 electrical distribution panels for the entire building. The door was only secured by dint of a simple square key fitting, and the application of a large flat blade screwdriver would pop the latch no problem. Thus I opened the door to reveal the distro itself. Pulling the cover open, I was presented with a large panel containing 20 large 80 amp fuses, one each for the lower set of flats. Each one was neatly labeled with the flat's number and TWAS, but a moment to locate the appropriate one. Now, by one of those happy coincidences that usually only occur in the more egregious examples of the Hollywood B-movie, I just happened to have in my toolkit a dead fuse of exactly the same type and capacity. A few weeks previously it had to replace a similar fuse in the theater where I worked, and it tossed the dead fuse in my toolbox where I'd promptly forgotten about it until now. Now, with all my ducks in a neat row, I pulled the fuse carrier for the miscreants flat out. Instant. Blessed. Silence. I rapidly swapped the live fuse for the dead one and reinserted the carrier. Securing everything back up again, I casually strolled back upstairs to enjoy a few hours in the hallowed arms of Morpheus. Addendum: some weeks later, the troublesome family were moved out of their flat. It transpired that the local council had received so many noise complaints over the previous 6 months that they were obliged to rehouse them elsewhere. My dean. Let's call him Gary. Well anyway, Gary loved to just throw your past in your face when you get in trouble for something as minor as a dress code violation. Now on to the main story. One day I stopped by after school in his office and talked about graduation, since I just barely made the cut. Well, he tells me I can't graduate since I got in trouble, and apparently under his rules I was not to be in trouble. It was a dress code violation. Wrong polo color, so I was very upset, but kept my cool and had explained the situation and why I couldn't wear the right polo. He didn't believe me and told me to get out of his office before I get a detention. I thought this was stupid, and all the caro he talked to my mom about graduation and what I should wear and all was just one big lie. The ProRevenge part is here. So about 3 weeks after the initial conversation, I walk up near my maths teacher's classroom and I look through the little glass panel on the side of the door to see my math teacher Jessica kissing my principal, who is married. I was in absolute shock and couldn't believe my eyes. I felt like I had to go, but instead a revenge plan was born. Every day after school I recorded and took pictures of the affair until I had about 30 minutes of video and 12 to 30 photos of their kissing, groping, etc. Did I mention I was in JROTC and had a presentation about a month later? A month later I planned it all out, and it involved 15 kids and me who controlled our presentation. Lol, revenge was mine. So the day of the presentation I put up my presentation of every single photo of his affair and managed to hide it until him and his wife arrived and sat down, including every faculty member except the science teachers. Even his mistress was down a few tables. So when the presentation started I popped the first picture on the screen with the date. The horror on his daughter's face was amazing. Sounds horrible, but I loved seeing him in pain, and he just got up and left. His wife cried, and his mistress ran out and cried hysterically like a baby. I sat there and cycled through more and more of the affair presentation until I was forced to shut it off. 2 weeks I get a call that I'm being suspended for 5 days due to me ruining the JROTC day, and accepted the punishment. He resigned and his wife filed for divorce. His mistress is on administrative leave, but will soon resign. I know the title sounds like I'm a 65-year-old man host constantly running to the front door yelling at kids on the other side of the street to not play on my lawn, but hear me out. BTW, am from Germany, so I apologize for some of the vocabs not being used right. We have been living in a mid-upper class street of my town for around 10 years now. Due to regulations that our real estate agent didn't mention when selling it to my mom and dad, our foundations were set lower than the ones of our neighbors, which was not much of a problem until the neighbor right in front of us. We have a small sideway in the street where our and other houses are located, so our houses are just 4 meters apart from each other. Started to grow bushes to seal off his garden from the outside world. When we noticed them getting bigger, we did what every person would do and jokingly reminded him to please keep the bushes in check so they don't grow too big. They ignored it for as long as they lived there, which freaked my mother out. She is mentally ill, which ultimately led to her not being able to really work anything but a 450 job anymore, despite her only being in her late 40s. Me and my brother weren't able to clean our front yard as often as it needs to be cleaned due to school and university being very stressful. We would have to clean it on the daily basis even in summer because their bushes were shedding leaves left and right. Another thing that was annoying was that our rain drains for our front porch and garage were stuffed up with the leaves and would regularly overflow. My neighbors then moved out about 1 year ago, and a new couple moved in who we first thought were nice. Turns out they were even worse than the other neighbors and even mouthier. They made very clear that the sealed off garden and their house having a higher foundation than ours and the rest of our neighbors' properties were the main reasons they bought it, and they won't change anything about it. My mom was getting so freaked out about all of that. Keep in mind that she is ill, that she was close to selling the house. The neighbor kept being annoying as hell and even threw parties in his garden, which oftentimes were way too loud, and kept all neighbors awake, resulting in us, or one of our neighbors, having to call the police. So one day my mother looked out the front door and snapped after seeing how many leaves and other crap from the neighbor's bushes were laying in our front yard. She ran out into the garage, grabbed a lawn bag, put a bunch of the stuff that was laying in our front yard into it, and threw them in front of my neighbor's door. Illegal in Germany. A few hours later my neighbor came to us, being petty and all smug, saying he would sue us, and that we would have to pay loads and loads of money for ruining his front yard with our garbage etc. Afterwards he took photos of our house and even zoomed into our windows. Illegal as well, which I was lucky to see through my window and record him doing it. I then proceeded to look into city regulations, and soon found out that we couldn't really do anything about their leaves falling on our front yard, but there is an extra clause in the regulations, which states that this only applies for as long as the other party's living conditions are not compromised. When our neighbor then went through with his lawsuit, I was completely prepared to ruin his day. The judge wanted to make it a quick case, but our lawyer showed her all the evidence that clearly showed him that his leaves were 1. Compromising our living quality by blocking our drains with his garbage, and 2. He was breaking privacy laws by filming our house without consent. Further, my mom has a disabled ID due to her illness, which combined with us telling her, the judge, for how long we had to endure all of this, led to the charges against us being dropped and him having to pay a fee for breaking privacy laws and him having to do something against his bushes. My neighbor was then given 2 options on how he could proceed. 1. He somehow manages to stop the leaves from falling on our property, or he has to tear everything down and has to build another form of protection, which would not compromise our living quality. He had 1 month to find a solution, but ended up not finding one, which led to him having to tear down the whole thing. My mom was happier than I had ever seen her in the past 10 years and sat through the whole thing. The only thing that was missing to make all of this perfect was her having popcorn XD. Thank you for watching. Slap that like button and comment your opinion on these stories below. I'm waiting. Write that comment. Seriously. Have you written it yet? If you don't comment, you make a bunny cry somewhere. You're not that kind of person, I know. Anyways, peace out, and catch you tomorrow.